Hey, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here. If you are new, I'm Lucia. I am a mum to one, very soon to be two, and I'm also a qualified personal trainer. I vlog about all things health, fitness, and of course motherhood. So if that is a bit of you, please subscribe to my channel and connect with me on Instagram. I would love to get to know you. Now, in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about writing your birth plan, which is really important, but we're going to look at the things that you actually need to consider that no one else is going to talk to you about. So let's get started. Now, your birth plan is actually more accurately described as your birth preferences, i.e. a list of things that you would like to happen in your ideal scenario. If you're watching this, it's probably your first baby, you're probably writing your birth plan for the first time and you're thinking of a list of things that you really want to happen, and you're not going to be thinking about the things that might or could go wrong. And that's fine, that's completely normal. You're a first time mum. You're in the euphoria of having a baby. I was exactly the same. Why would things not go exactly according to plan? Now, I don't want to scare you. I don't want you to sit here and think, oh God, now all of these things could go wrong. Your birth can and probably will go exactly as you want it to. But there are also lots of births that don't go according to plan. And from my own personal experience having a birth that didn't go according to plan, the best thing you can do is be prepared for if things don't go exactly as you want them to. Now, everyone is in agreement that it's a really good idea to have a birth plan. Your midwife wants to know who you are, what you want, how you want your birth to go. It helps her to help you, and that is what she's there for, okay? That's what you have to remember. The midwife is there to help you have the birth that you want, to deliver your baby safely and to take good care of you. Everyone is also in agreement that it's really important that you remain flexible, so that if things don't go exactly according to plan, A, you'll have a plan B, and B, you won't get too caught up on the fact that things didn't happen exactly as you thought they would. Every birth, no matter how far off plan it goes, can be a positive experience if you are prepared enough. Also, having your birth plan or list of preferences mapped out will help you get as many of those things as possible. So let's say you have a birth plan and your birth plan is a water birth and skin to skin, but you don't manage to have the water birth. If they know that you want the skin to skin, you're much more likely to still get that skin to skin. If you don't have a birth plan and you, in your mind, you're like, yes, I want a water birth and skin to skin, and then your water birth doesn't go according to plan, so then you're thrown off and you forget to ask for the other things that you want. Your midwife doesn't know that you want skin to skin, and so she might take the baby, weigh it, do the paperwork, clean it up for you before bringing it back, and then you haven't got two things on your birth plan, or two things on your birth preferences, should we say. So having them all mapped out will make sure that you'll get as many of them as is possible on the day. So it's really good to have a birth plan, birth preferences, and it's really good to remain flexible and to say, okay, well, if that can't happen, we can do this instead, and we can still have a really, really positive experience. Now, my first birth with Eli went so far off plan that I ended up with postnatal depression. I was in therapy for 17 months coming to terms with everything that happened. And I honestly believe that the reason it took me so long to get over everything that happened to me is A, it just never occurred to me that things could go wrong. I had my heart set on this perfect birth, and when it didn't happen, I was absolutely devastated. And I wasn't prepared to deal with things when they did go wrong. So we ended up on a conveyor belt of instructions and being told what would happen next, how things would progress, how they would be dealt with. We didn't make any decisions. Once we got to the labour ward, we were completely told what to do. And that was because I had no preparation for what to do under these circumstances. I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like I could ask questions. I didn't feel like I could challenge anything. And so it all ended up in a complete disaster. I'm going to be completely honest with you. And it took me a long time to get over it. I don't want that to happen to you. I'm not saying your birth is going to be nearly as difficult as mine. I am saying if you are prepared for when things don't go according to plan, you will feel a lot more empowered and you will have a much more positive experience. So unlike most birth plan videos you're going to see on YouTube, what we're going to cover in this video is things that can take you off plan and how you can be best prepared for them so that you can have a positive birth experience however things end up. Right, so what I'm going to do now is sit at my computer, get my birth preferences sheet up on the screen, share my screen with you so you can see exactly what I've written, and then I'll talk you through why I've made some of the decisions that I've made this time, having learned from my previous experience. Just to give you a very quick outline, my waters broke at home and they were green. So that meant that he had basically done a poo, there was meconium in the waters, and so the completely intervention-free natural water birth that I had planned for in the midwifery-led unit was no longer an option for us. We had to be on the labour ward, continuously monitored. So that kind of just gives you an idea of how quickly things can change during birth. One minute you're all set up for one type of birth and the next minute something completely out of your control changes things and you end up having a completely different kind of birth. We ended up on a conveyor belt of interventions. We weren't really ever asked what we wanted to do. It was kind of just like we were told this is what needs to happen next. Obviously you're very concerned about your baby, so you do as you're told basically, but I now looking back feel like things could have been done differently, and if they had been done differently we may have had a different outcome. So that is why this birth plan is very important to me and why I have chosen to include how I would like things to be managed should things not go according to plan again. Okay, so obviously we've started off with my name, and the name of my birth partner is my husband Scott. I'll add his telephone number in here. The first thing I've included is important to know. So I think it's very important that the person looking after us knows that we had a traumatic birth the last time, because then it allows them to deal with us a little bit differently. You know, we've had a very bad experience. We would like this experience to be healing for us, and so I think it just helps them to understand where we're coming from a little bit more. I've just put that my previous birth was very traumatic, ended in a PPH, I lost consciousness, I suffered with postnatal depression, and so we're anxious about this birth. We'd like to have a healing experience and we'd really appreciate your support in helping to make that happen. And then I've just said how they can help us to make that happen, allowing us to stay together throughout the labour and as long as possible afterwards. With Eli, we didn't get the golden hour. We were separated pretty much as soon as he was born. And obviously now with the new COVID regulations, who knows where we're going to be by the time the baby comes. Listening to us if we have concerns, keeping us informed and helping us to make informed decisions, and helping us to have our birth preferences met as much as possible. You may or may not have something that you want them to know. Obviously, if this is your first baby, you won't have had a traumatic experience before, but you may have a certain anxiety that is or isn't related to childbirth. You may have just certain, you know, little things that are very important to you that you would like your midwife to know about you, that you could say, look, this is who I am, this is what I would like you to know about me, because then that will allow them to tailor their care to your specific needs. So the first thing we're going to go on to look at is pain management. Now this is obviously very important. It's going to be a part of your labour. I've done a hypnobirthing course and I understand that it's important to breathe now and all of that, but let's just be honest. Labour is painful and you are going to have to manage that pain one way or another, and how you manage that pain is an important part of the care that your midwife gives you. So I have said my preferred methods of pain management are breathing techniques learnt from hypnobirthing, gas and air, movement and massage. So getting comfortable, having massages from Scott, I want to try and keep it as natural as possible this time. I don't want pethidine or diamorphine at any stage. Please don't offer it to me. Now, I've said that because my understanding of both of these drugs is that, one, they make mum very drowsy, and two, they can be passed on to the baby. So I have watched labour story videos on YouTube where the women have said basically they had one of these drugs and then they either slept through a cesarean or don't remember the first hour of the baby's life, or felt so drowsy that they didn't really understand what was going on. And when we had our antenatal classes with Eli, we were told that these two drugs can and do get passed on to the baby. If you have them later on in your labour, it can lead to the baby being sluggish when they're first born. So I personally am taking the choice that I don't want to be given any drugs that are going to impact my cognitive facilities. I want to be aware and awake at all times, and I certainly don't want anything that's going to be passed on to the baby and affect them. Not that it's a long-lasting effect, not that, you know, it could damage them in any way. It's just not for me. I did have an epidural with Eli, so I understand how that works. I would be comfortable having one again if it was absolutely necessary, if for some reason I couldn't stand the pain. I'm hoping I'm going to manage it this time with the breathing and just the gas and air. I feel like I could have under different circumstances last time. I would do it differently this time. So when I had the epidural, I was completely numb when I gave birth. I had a really good midwife who coached me to push, and we got him out without any other interventions, which is quite strange for someone who's completely numb from an epidural. So I am happy about that, but I did tear quite badly and it was not a pleasant experience at all. It was really like hard pushing for an hour, and I don't want to do that again. And I now understand that what you can do is have the epidural throughout your labour, and then when it comes time to push, you can lessen the effects of it, so you can wean yourself off of it and get some feeling back by the time it comes time to push. So then this time, if I did need an epidural for whatever reason, that is how I would do it. Towards the time when they say, okay, we're going to start, you know, the baby's ready to come, you're 10 centimetres, whatever, I would like to lessen the effect of the epidural, get some sensation back, and then bring in the hypnobirthing breathing techniques and just try to get the baby out a bit more calmly this time. That is an option that I wasn't aware of last time, so I would definitely be doing that if I have another epidural. Now, the environment, as I said, we had planned to have this really home from home natural birth in the midwifery led unit. When we found out we were then going to be on the labour ward, I kind of, in my mind, I went, oh, okay, we're on the labour ward, therefore now we're going to be in the hospital and the environment is what it is. But actually, just because you're on the labour ward, you can still have a very calming environment. How you have the room is up to you. It's your room, it's your birth, and you can ask to have the lights dimmed. As I've said, I'll bring my own battery operated tea lights. I can have my own music, ask people to talk quietly and to knock before entering. All of the things that I was expecting to have on the midwifery led unit that I thought wouldn't be possible on the labour ward are actually possible. So I've asked for them all this time. And what my midwife said to me when I showed her this was that you can actually bring a sign for the door and say on the door, we're hypnobirthing, please enter quietly, please knock before, you know, entering, etc, etc. So I'm going to do that. And then I've just said I would like the minimum number of people in the room and only when absolutely necessary, and the rest of the time we'd like to be on our own. Now, because we were under observation last time, we had a midwife in there for the entirety of the labour, and I understand why, and that's fine. Obviously, all of these things are if possible, you know, if the baby needs something that makes this not possible, then we go with it. But we would like to be on our own. We'd like some privacy. It's a very private, personal, vulnerable time for a mum when she's giving birth. And I think in the hospital, you know, it just kind of gets turned into a very clinical situation. When we had Eli, people would just come in and go in, out of the room, in and out of the room. Yeah, it just felt like we had no control over that. But actually, you can control it. You can request people to knock. You can request to be on your own if, you know, you're not required to be under observations. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I've just asked to have a nice calm room this time, instead of this very sterile environment where people just walk in and act like you're having a toenail removed, you know. So then on to the monitoring. This again is a very important part of the birth preferences for me personally. Now, when I had Eli, as I said, I was under constant observation, and so I was strapped up to the CTG, I've called it EFM, and if you've ever been to the hospital for reduced fetal movements, you'll know you get 2 pads placed on your stomach and it monitors the baby's heartbeat on one of those machines, sonograph, I'm not sure. Now, when I had Eli, the machine had a wire that was about 1 meter long, and if I moved, the machine went off. I don't know if the machine was faulty or if it was, that's just how they were designed then, but I literally could not move without this machine turning off and then the midwife coming over and saying we need to get the pads back on because I can't hear the baby's heartbeat and it's obviously very important. So that meant I was basically confined to the bed in a sitting upright position for 12 hours while I had the most painful contractions going down through my coccyx, and it was really unbearable. It was a really horrible experience, and given that even with my limited knowledge of labour, I felt like if I could just walk around, if I could just lean over the bed, if I could just get comfortable, I could bear this. But having to sit in the same position on my butt for 12 hours was absolutely excruciating, and it was because this machine would only work if I was in this very specific position. So this time I've asked for a wireless version of that machine, which I understand is available now, and if not, then I need some other way of you to monitor the baby if necessary that allows me to move around. One thing just to say, if you're having a baby on the NHS, is that first of all, of course, your care is of the primary concern. They want to keep you well, they want to keep the baby well. But secondly comes convenience, and probably joint second is cost effectiveness. So the first option that you will be given by the NHS when it comes to an intervention will be the most convenient and the most cost effective. For example, they might say to me, okay, we need to monitor the baby, and I'll say, well, I would like a wireless monitor, and they will say, well, I'm afraid we don't have one available, you'll just have to have this one because it's the most convenient and the most cost effective. To which I'm then going to say, well, I'm not comfortable with this because I don't want to be confined to the bed, so what are the alternatives? And there will always be an alternative. It just might be more time consuming or more expensive, but 9 times out of 10 there will be an alternative to what you're being offered. It's just that they offer you the most convenient first. So whatever happens, I'm determined this time that I will be able to move around during my labour. I'll be able to get into comfortable positions. However we need to do that is how we need to do it. If a midwife needs to sit the whole pregnancy with one of those little Dopplers listening to the baby's heartbeat, then so be it. I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to ask for. So there'll always be an alternative. So just think to yourself, okay, can we do this in another way if what they're offering you doesn't quite work? The next thing I've said is I don't want any internal examinations unless deemed absolutely necessary for the well-being of myself or my baby. Now, this will depend, I think, on the generosity of the person booking us in, because with COVID at the moment, they are saying you have to be in established labour, which is 4 centimetres dilated before your partner's allowed in. So that's a little bit of a grey area at this point in time. But generally, I've opted for no internal examinations. The reason for this is when I had Eli and my waters were already broken and I had a number of internal examinations, more probably than the average woman, because I wasn't progressing as they expected me to. I think personally, because I was confined to the bed sitting on my bum in a very uncomfortable position, it was like, you know, who's going to progress like that when really what your body wants to do is move around and you know, get the baby down. I had a lot of internal examinations. I found them very, very uncomfortable. Some of them were excruciatingly painful, and towards the end of the labour I got a temperature. That meant that I then had to have antibiotics, and that then meant that Eli had to have antibiotics. So Eli was a brand new born baby, and he was given intravenous antibiotics just in case. Like, there was no risk to him. He had no sign of infection, but because I had had an infection, they then had to give him prophylactic antibiotics. Now, one, you know, we talk about skin to skin, and we talk about the microbiome, passing it on to the baby to strengthen their immune system, and then you're going to give him antibiotics which basically completely destroy his whole microbiome. They kill the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. So this brand new baby comes out into the world and is given antibiotics that completely strips him of his microbiome. I found that very upsetting, especially because it was prophylactic. It was not necessary, it was just in case. And secondly, they took him for those antibiotics when I was just coming round from losing consciousness and having the postpartum hemorrhage. So Scott had to go with Eli. Scott actually had to make a choice as to whether he wanted to stay with me, who he had just witnessed bleeding out, collapsing, or taking his newborn son to get antibiotics. It put him in a very difficult position because he was obviously very concerned about me, but didn't want the baby to be taken away and then not know where he is or what's happening. So he went with Eli, and they were gone for hours. I didn't see them for the first 4 hours of Eli's life. That had a knock-on effect to our bonding later on, to our breastfeeding later on. It had just such a real snowball of effects, which I found very difficult to deal with later. And when I had my debrief, I was actually told it was pretty standard to be given antibiotics after so many internal examinations. It was very common to get an infection after having so many internal examinations, but nobody told me that at the start. Nobody said, you know, you've had this many now, and if we do this many more, you know, etc., etc. It was never explained to me. So personally for me, if we can avoid them, I would like to avoid internal examinations as much as possible. I have looked into this and I have found there are alternative methods that can be used. One is the fundus method I've put here, which is where the midwife can feel below your sternum. She should be able to feel how far down your uterus has moved, and that should give them a good indication of how dilated you are, or at least what kind of stage of labour you're at. There's a new thing now that people are talking about, which is the purple line technique, which is where you basically get a dark purple line leading up from your bum, up through the crack of your bum, basically to your lower back, and how long that purple line is up the back is an indication of how dilated you are, and they're saying it's pretty reliable. Now, the only issue with this is that for women of colour, like myself, it really depends on how visible the line is. So I find that the pigmentation in my skin in certain parts of my body during both my pregnancies has actually got a lot darker. So I can't say if they're going to be able to see the purple line on me, and it's a bit of a grey area, to be honest. I can't really find any research talking about the difference between skin colours and the purple line, etc., etc. But I think it's worth a try. Then we've got cold legs. So basically, as the blood starts to concentrate in the area where it's needed most in your uterus, your legs get progressively colder. If somebody who's had a baby has said to you, make sure you take socks to the hospital, that's why your feet get cold during labour, because the blood is all going to where it's needed most. So that's another one. And then just general observations. You know, these midwives are professionals. You know, an internal examination is not the only way to tell if you're in established labour, how far dilated you are. Again, it's the most convenient, cost-effective way, but I'm going to ask them to try using other techniques. Okay, so then just coming on to plans for the actual labour. Again, I've said I want to be able to move around the room. I want to use a birthing ball, cushions, you know, whatever supports there are, leaning over the bed. I just want to be able to move around and get comfortable and not be confined to the bed. I will be using breathing techniques throughout my labour, the ones I've learnt from the hypnobirthing course. As long as my baby is not in distress, I want my body to be given the time it needs to birth the baby as calmly and gently as possible. I don't want to be coached into push in unless it's deemed absolutely necessary. I want to be able to calmly get this baby out and for it not to feel like a really rushed, forced experience as it was last time. For the birthing position, I want to be upright and forwards. I'll try different positions, leaning over the bed, squatting, all fours until I find one that is comfortable. Again, as I said last time, I wasn't able to do this because I was confined to the machine. I was sitting up in a reclined position with my feet braced, which is extremely inefficient when giving birth. So on TV, everybody's always lying down, they've got their feet braced and they're pushing for their life. In reality, when you're lying down, your coccyx is shaped like this, okay? So you have to get your baby down, up and over. So with Eli, what was happening is I was pushing and he was basically doing this for a long time, and it took every will in this world that I have to get him out and over. If you're standing up, awkward position, you don't have to get him up and over. Gravity helps you. And I mean, obviously they don't just fall out, if only, but it's a lot easier for them to come out. So you really want to be in an upright position. And I would like to just take my time, as long as the baby is not in any distress, allow my body to work at its own pace. And then I've just said I want both my husband and I to be given a full explanation of benefits and risks, time to consider any decisions that need to be made if the birth does not progress as expected. In the case of an emergency, we will follow the doctor's advice. Now, of course, if somebody says to you, your life is in danger, your baby's life is in danger, you're going to do whatever it takes for you to stay safe, okay? That is a given. And nothing in this birth plan that I have written supersedes that. If they say to me, no, this is an emergency, I will say, okay, you do what it takes, right? But 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, you will have 10 minutes to make an informed decision. So in any other situation that's a non-emergency, if they say we want to do this or we think we need that, I want a full explanation of the benefits, the risks, alternatives, what happens if we do nothing. And then I want to make an informed decision. I want to be given time for myself and Scott to have a discussion and make that decision. Not that we're going to sit there, you know, having a cup of tea chatting about it for hours, but just a few minutes to say, okay, we agree, we don't agree, we'd like to try something else. As I said before, we ended up on this conveyor belt of interventions, being told what to do. We never really asked what we wanted, and just, yeah, this time I would like to be able to say, okay, yeah, I've thought about it and I agree, let's do it, or not. Okay, so then interventions. I don't want an episiotomy unless it's deemed an emergency. Now, research shows that when the skin tears naturally, it actually heals more easily than if it's cut. I would like to avoid assisted delivery, induction, forceps, suction, 1-2s, cesarean. I think everybody does in general, unless it's deemed an emergency, of course. And Scott will stay with me throughout if interventions are necessary. Placenta delivery, this is, and again, an important one for myself, just based on what happened last time with Eli. They had trouble getting the placenta out and it wasn't given much time. It was kind of like, right, we need to get it out. I was given the injection, it didn't come out. I don't actually know what happened, it's not on my notes, we couldn't discuss it in the debrief, but I had had an epidural, so I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't feel anything, but I suffered a hemorrhage and lost consciousness. So at the time, now I don't know if it, you know, nobody really knows what happened, but what I'm saying is I want to be kept involved and informed regarding the placenta delivery. Assisted delivery is now recommended for me in order to avoid another hemorrhage because they don't know what caused the first one. But I don't want it to be rushed. I want to be part of the process. I want to try and expel it naturally if I can. And I don't want it to be removed forcibly unless it's deemed absolutely necessary. So again, that's just for me, you know, depending on where you're at by the time you've had the baby, how long your labour has been, how difficult it's been, you know, you may just want it out, you may feel like you've got the time to expel it yourself, but the most important thing to me is that I'm kept informed about what's going on and how it's going and when it's coming, and if I can help to get it out, push, if I haven't had, you know, an epidural, and I can be a part of that. So again, that's just another thing that's important to me. Then we've got plans for baby on delivery. So this is kind of just the standard. I want skin to skin immediately. I didn't have this last time. If I can't do it, Scott should do it. I want fully delayed cord clamping, so ideally 10 minutes, 3 minutes minimum. Scott will cut the cord. We would like skin to skin for the first hour after birth and to be left alone if possible. The weighing, the measuring, the paperwork, the cleaning up of the baby, all of that can wait. And that golden hour should just be about us. It should be about you, your baby, your partner. And so we would just like to be left alone. We didn't get that last time. As I said, we were separated almost as soon as Eli was born. So that first hour to us this time is really, really important, and we just want to have it to ourselves. And then vitamin K drops to be given, not by injection. Again, that's just a personal thing for me. Breastfeeding. I breastfed Eli for 17 months. I would like to think I know what I'm doing. However, you just don't know. All babies are different. And again, because Eli was taken for his antibiotics the last time and I didn't see him for like 4 hours, they were very keen to give him something to eat. I was very poorly. I was, you know, this close. They were telling me I needed a blood transfusion. Everybody kind of just said, you're not going to breastfeed this baby, you're not well enough. So they gave him formula, which then obviously makes it more difficult to breastfeed because then you have to wean him off. He was on formula for the first few weeks of his life before I managed to switch to breastfeeding exclusively. So if I feel like I need it, I would like help to get the breastfeeding going straight away with this baby. And then on the last page, I've just included how I would like things to go if we end up having an unplanned cesarean. I've asked for a natural, gentle cesarean, and that is where they cut you open and they allow the baby some time to find his own way out instead of pulling him out. And it's supposed to be a lot closer to birth than a regular cesarean. I would still like the delayed cord clamping as much as possible, although in a theatre environment it's not possible to have 10 minutes. You're there with an open wound, they're worried about you getting an infection, so what they can do is milk the cord, push as much of the cord blood towards the baby as possible. They are saying now that there are definitely benefits to delayed cord clamping. 10 minutes is optimal. There's no risk if you don't have delayed cord clamping, but they're saying in children as old as like 3 or 4, if they do blood tests, they can tell from the number of stem cells who's had delayed cord clamping. So if at all possible, definitely want that. If you have a cesarean, it won't be as long, but whatever you can get is better than nothing. I would still like skin to skin immediately after he's birthed. If not possible for me, then it should be Scott. Place the electrodes on my back so they don't get in the way of that skin to skin. Lights to be dimmed if possible. You know, you can still have music, you can still have dimmed lights if you want, you can still have, you know, certain little things in the room. I mean, I feel like once I'm in a cesarean environment, those things are going to be less important to me, but dimmed lights, I believe, is better for the baby, doesn't come out into bright light. And then I've just said I don't need to see the baby being born. Again, personal to me, I'm not a fan of seeing things cut open, especially myself. So that's just my personal thing. And then if we do have to have an induction, and I really pray that we don't, I would still like to maintain the unclinical environment as much as possible. I would like to try it without an epidural. I don't know if that would be possible. And as I said before, if I do need an epidural, then I would like to be weaned off of it towards the time when it comes time to push, so that I can have my baby in a calm and gentle way. So that is my birth plan, guys. I'm sorry it's taken a little while to go through all of that, but I think it's really important to explain to you why all of these things are really important, and you know, the alternatives that you can have even when things aren't going according to plan. Yeah, so that's it for me. I really hope you have found this video useful. I really hope that you take something away from it and that it helps you to have a more empowered birth. I really wish you all the best with your labour and your birth and your babies, and do let me know if you have any comments at all. I would be really happy to answer any questions, and I hope you have the absolute birth of your dreams, as I hope I will have the birth of my dreams this time. So until my next video next week, that's all from me. Thank you for watching.